You're with Budget Barometer here on NDTV, and given that we've just got, some hours to go before we know what Budget 2017 contains, this is our last spotlight on some key sectors of the economy, what they're seeking from Budget 2017, and more importantly, what's really likely to come through. I'd like to welcome in at this stage Abhay Agarwal, partner of the infrastructure practice at EY, joining us in our Delhi studios. Mr. Agarwal, many thanks for joining us. Let's get straight to it. And infrastructure is such a broad word that, I'm wondering what's a good starting point, given that this is a budget which is going to merge the rail and union budget and perhaps dilute the focus that the rail budget has typically got. Let's start with that. How are you sort of expecting things to pan out when it comes to the railway piece of the combined budget?
Okay, so we all expect gross budgetary support to go up substantially this year. However, the important thing would be to see how much is the capital expenditure goes up, be it PPP or non-PPP, because it doesn't matter whether it's PPP or not. It matters what contract goes in the market. And more than in terms of outlay on capital expenditure, how is the capacity going up? Because we saw both in railways and highway sector is the budgetary support has gone up, the capital expenditure outlay has gone up, but what is really not happening in terms of capacity to roll out projects. So how is that being tackled? Second thing is that recently government has been talking about rail safety fund on account of a lot of accidents which have been happening. And they have been talking about 20 to 25,000 crore kind of per year, which was also talked about Sam Petroda. I think everybody will like to see that how it is created and how it is funded, because 25% is also supposed to be funded from safety cess on passengers. And I think that is going to be very crucial, because what is happening is the replacement of existing stock, both signaling and track, is not happening as much as it should be happening, because the depreciation reserve fund has gone down substantially last year.
Okay, so in a sense, you're preparing us for perhaps a safety cess that rail passengers may have to bear. Would you rate the probability of that coming through in this budget as fairly high?
Given the timing, it may not happen. But sooner or later it has to happen, because ultimately money has to come from somewhere. You call it fare, you call it cess, but somebody has to pay for it. And people who are using it, they should pay for it more. But at the end of the day, there is a limit to what gross budgetary support can support really in terms of investments. Okay,
so that's the railways piece. And I want to shift focus now to for example, the power sector, which has, of course, been an important area of reform for this government. There is a case in point. On the power sector, what is, the context, according to you, ahead of this budget? What's the remaining work that really needs to be addressed urgently?
Okay, so what has the good story of power is about renewables and about transmission. Government has invested a huge amount of money in transmission infrastructure. But Uday, whether it will be successful or not, it will also depend upon the distribution, reforms, franchisee, PPP, investment, because that is the end where the money has to come ultimately. Transmission is more of a monopoly infrastructure which has to transmit. But at the end of the day, the money, the power has to be supplied to the retailers, and the money has to be got from there. And that is the end which has still not taken very far in terms of power sector. But government has recently announced. So we see more of it, we see major emphasis, and that is going to take the power sector far.
Okay. In specific terms, when it comes to the direct and indirect tax pieces, can this budget deliver something that the power sector is seeking? Private players in the sector?
So I think largely the investment is coming from government. So tax is really not a kind of game changer. Yeah, it is not a game changer. I think important thing is reforms, and important thing is the order book.
Okay, let's shift our focus now to the ports piece. And there, again, how would you sort of frame the agenda for work that still needs to be done when it comes to the port sector?
So I think the port story is largely a efficiency story. We have a lot of ports in terms of turnaround time, etc., berthing time, it is very, very less. And we can create a lot of capacity just out of existing ports. And I think that is the focus, because government has got done a study in terms of increasing the efficiency, mechanization, automation of ports. So that should be the first focus in terms of how do we get better out of existing ports. Second thing is they have planned about 8 ports, greenfield ports, and number of investment in inland waterways. So that should be now coming on stream, because they are really long-term lead items. Port is not easy to invest upfront, be it PPP or non-PPP. Largely so far investment has come from private sector. But going forward, perhaps government would be spending a lot of money on port infrastructure and inland waterways.
You know, inland waterways, sure, it's been also getting that talk time in a sense by the government. But when we talk about expectations of greater spend on something like ports, we have to consider commitments to fiscal deficit targets, competing expenditure priorities, and this time around some freebies perhaps to bring back the consumption cycle as well. So really, in terms of prioritizing what the port sector needs, could the government or the budget focus much more on further enabling private investment as the one-year plan forward?
Yeah, I think so. And they have already done. So if you see TEMP, which kind of regulates the ports, private ports, etc., and in government major port, they are already being dismantled substantially. So, and that is a big step. But I think important thing is that, you know, your imported coal is not there. Export is not really going up substantially. So overall port traffic is going up just at 4%. So how much private sector is really going to pump in some of the new ports is really, we have to see really. I mean, whether they are attractive, whether somebody will come or not come. So we should be only investing into very efficient ports, if at all greenfield ports, otherwise invest into existing ports.
Okay, which brings us to the other piece, and there are so many pieces to the conversation on infrastructure. You know, I'm going to actually come to the road space now to try and understand, again, pressing work remaining to be done. Yeah.
So, you know, government announced an ambitious target on its own, 40 kilometers per day. And what they have been able to achieve is 27%. But this is up substantially as compared to last year. So I think it's always a good side, bad side. And as I said earlier, by the time you have intent to do something and by the time something gets rolled out on the ground, there is a lead time of at least 12 months to 2 years rather. So we will see substantially better story next year, and that's why in railways and roads both, I think it is not about how much is the outlay, it is about how much is really spent, because the capacity is limited and overnight capacity cannot go up.
And there are commitments from the minister overseeing roads that, the government will get on track to meet its ambitious target. We're always constrained when it comes to time for such conversations. But given the remaining basket of infrastructure, broadly speaking, aviation is one piece of it as well. Touch upon some of the key expectations in the remaining areas.
So I don't know whether it will happen or not, because, but I think some of the brownfield airports should be privatized. And we have good stories around privatized airports. And they have really added to our GDP and increase in traffic, etc. This is high time when we should invest into PPPs and privatization of existing airports.
And actually, one could argue the likelihood for that is pretty strong, because this is a government that's also focused on, fostering regional connectivity as well. It's talking about air traffic beyond the conventional big city footprint that it enjoys, right? So would you rate the probability high? Although you started your comment by saying, I don't know if it will happen in the budget.
So in terms of regional airports, smaller airports, I don't think they will happen through PPP, and let's not stretch
because there's
PPP.
No market for it.
There is no market. It will take a lot of time to establish market. So the best thing is to actually privatize brownfield airports, get some money out of it and invest into regional airports.
In fact, one of the conversations I had ahead of the budget suggested that you could see some innovative ways of, generating resources in this budget, simply because, there is the demand for consumption to be revived. There is a requirement for investment to continue at full throttle. So where will the extra money come from? Abhay Agarwal, I'm going to leave it at that. Many thanks for your insights. And of course, we should know in a couple of hours what the budget actually delivers. Budget Barometer will be back in a moment.